I don't mind too much everything that happens around it. I just wouldn't want the message to get lost. It seems to me that we just need to reflect a little bit on what it is we're celebrating, rather than just going into celebration, as it were, for the sake of it, and to draw strength for ourselves and for our own lives from that sense of a relationship with God. That, I think, in the end, is the irreducible minimum. That's what I don't want us to lose, just that sense that God has a care for each and every one of us. God reaches out to each and every one of us. God embraces each and every one of us. And I think if we are able to have that recollection, that reflection each year at Christmas, then quite frankly, over and above that, I don't mind what else goes on, really.
There's been a lot of talk of late of the Christian message getting somewhat lost in this ever-increasingly fast-paced world that we live in. Do you think Christmas provides an opportunity to really put that across?
It does. I mean, I think I'd probably say the same about Easter as well, and about other aspects of the life of faith, if you like. But if we look at the world around us, and if we look at the extraordinary events of international politics, if we look at the very difficult year, certainly in United Kingdom politics, and the way that public debate, public conversation and discourse, certainly in the political sphere, has really become almost toxic, and the divisions that have been caused in political and social life by the events of this past year or so, I think I'd want to say, let's see if we can just bring back into that some compassion and some care for one another. And that again is when the Christmas story and the Christian faith, it seems to me, speaks profoundly into that.
Just moving on to the past year, you've just touched on it there, a toxic year in terms of politics and social aspects that have happened. You've been here on the Isle of Man for 15 months now. What have been the big issues that you've seen here in that time?
It's an interesting question. I mean, clearly what I was reflecting on just a moment ago around Brexit has much more to do with the United Kingdom and life in Westminster than it does necessarily here, although clearly it is for us a significant issue as well. I think, political debate and discussion in Tynwald and in the Isle of Man, I think, has, clearly that has not suffered from that same corrosive influence as I've just been describing at Westminster. And I think the sort of political and social life of the Isle of Man continues to be impressive in its graciousness and in its stability. Yes, we have significant issues to deal with. I was yesterday at a sort of a series of workshops really run by the Select Committee on Poverty in Tynwald, and I think there are some significant issues that we want to engage with there, and indeed I've reflected on one or two of them elsewhere recently, but issues to do with homelessness, to do with care for young people, particularly those who've had a disadvantaged start in life. I think we're perhaps beginning to understand more deeply some of the social challenges that we face, and that's really important. But for Tynwald to be able to engage with that through things like the Select Committee on Poverty, that's a really good thing to be happening.
Yeah, the spotlight really has come on poverty and all the issues you touched on in the last year, hasn't it?
It has.
That's got to be a start, hasn't it?
Very much so, very much so. And in terms of the support that we can give, for example, to those who have nowhere permanent to live, because homelessness does exist, to those who perhaps really struggle to provide food for their family, both in school terms and in the school holidays. These are really quite important issues, and we know that they exist. And in a smallish community like ours, I think when we turn the focus properly onto those things, we should be able to find solutions.
Just finally, you've played quite an active role in Tynwald. You have got up and spoken on occasions, and one of the big debates was a tricky one, I'm sure, for you, representing the Christian faith on the Isle of Man, and it was abortion. But in many respects, that saw Tynwald at its best.
Tynwald functions very, very well indeed, and I have to say that to be part of those discussions is a great privilege, and I've felt that since the moment I first walked in. On that particular debate, on that particular issue, I think the mind of the majority was clear, and that's fine. As with any significant issue to do with human life, there will be many aspects to this, many sides. And whilst people don't necessarily want to hear the bishop speaking all the time about everything, I think there are things that one should speak about. And part of my role, perhaps, is to say to people there may be another side to this question.
Your role seemed to be just to put a bit of perspective, maybe, in there.
I think that's what I wanted. I wanted to do that, to give a perspective and say there are several issues here about what it means to be human, and the beginning of life and the end of life are issues or times when those issues become particularly focused. And it was important for me, I think, that aspect of it should not be lost. And therefore to speak into that particular space for me was really important. And one does that knowing sometimes that one may persuade people and on other occasions one may not. But actually just to have that rounded discussion and ensure that we've looked at everything from the 360 degrees, that's really important.